Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is April 21st of 2025, the Suze Maclaine Pont Show, live on LinkedIn, Facebook, and your favorite streaming platform, where Jakko and myself, Suze, will be talking about family and trauma today. And it is a really, really, really interesting topic because it is Easter. Well, actually, yesterday it was Easter. But today in our country, we also have a second Easter day. I'm pretty sure we are the only country in the world that has a second Easter day, but we have 2 days of Easter celebration. And we had a very special family gathering yesterday, which we'll talk about. And first, I want to give you a heads up because talking about family, I'm doing this podcast together with my beautiful husband, Jakko. And Yucko has had some trouble with something interfering with his sound. So that's why we're starting late. Normally we start sharp at 4 p.m. It is now 9 minutes after 4 because we've had some trouble. Something is interfering with his sound. So at a certain point, I might be doing this whole episode solo. We'll see. Sometimes he will flip off and flip on. And because we're talking about family, this is interesting because it's bringing up a lot of patterns. We had it 1 or 2 episodes ago as well. These patterns are all family related. So, talking about family and trauma, we're in the middle of it. Yako, I'm so happy that you're here. Is there anything you want to say right now before I start talking about yesterday?
Mm, no, I think yeah, just it, it's very relatable, I guess, because most trauma, which isn't shock trauma, is related in how you were raised in your family. So it's a lot about where you come from, and it seems like we have a lot of DNA coming through our parents as well as the siblings have. But then I guess it's more about what happens after you're there than what you've been given.
That's a very, very interesting comment because I think if you're listening to this, you can probably relate to the fact that siblings are often very different. Yesterday, we had my two sisters here and my parents on a very special Easter celebration. Um, and my sisters both brought their 3 kids. So we had 8 kids here. We have 2 kids. And you can see that in every family, all siblings are very much related and very different at the same time. And then there's the life old question of what is DNA, what is nature, what is nurture. And then, even if it's nurture, then still, didn't we all have the same upbringing? To a certain degree, we did. And to a certain degree, we responded to that very differently. So it's a very, very interesting topic. And it's beautiful. So let's it's probably a good idea if I talk a little bit about yesterday, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yesterday we had my mom here. There's something kind of a white noise thing interfering in my headphones. Do you hear that too? Or is it? Oh, okay. Okay, guys, sound technically, this is not going to be the perfect episode. We will see. Let me see if I can change one thing. Did I now? No, still there. Okay, guys, sound technically, you're going to have to make do with what it is today because we're not going to have any more frustrations about that. So if there's a white noise, my apologies. Um, so yesterday we had a very special Easter celebration, and I think it's actually good to go into what Easter means as well. But we'll do that in a little bit. My mom turned 79 in February, and my sister has her birthday tomorrow, and then one of my little nephews has his birthday a few days ago. So there is a lot of celebrations going on in our family, and as siblings, we wanted to do something very special for our mom for once because my parents are both alive, but they're also not the youngest anymore. And while they're still mentally fit, physically fit, we thought, let's take them on a very nice trip down memory lane, both for them and for us. So now my older sister lives in Brussels. My younger sister lives here close by. And they all came over here and we had a walk in a place where my mom used to celebrate her birthdays when she was a little kid. And that was very nice because it's a really beautiful forest area. And she used to have her father used to take her there when she was 5 or 6 years old. And he would make a whole puzzle route and she would have to find all these little ribbons and stuff like that. And we actually don't really know to this day what used to happen on those puzzle routes, but it was a really nice thing because we thought, hey, let's do that with the entire family, with all the kids and with everybody. And let's ask her questions from when she was young and record her because my mom is a great storyteller. So what we did is we gave her a microphone and an iPhone, and she was walking there with her microphone, and we started asking her questions and recording her. And that revealed partly a lot of stories that we already knew because she's always been telling them, but we never recorded them. So in case she might die eventually, which is not going to happen anytime soon, but then still, you never know. Now they're recorded. But also, she told a lot of stories that I never heard. And also, our kids have never heard these stories. So we were walking in a little circle around her, listening to her stories of her life. And as much as I know that a lot of my developmental trauma comes from her childhood and from the way she was raised after the Second World War and the way her father, who was a soldier during the war, got traumatized in that war, and her mother, who fled from Hungary to a country that she barely spoke the language of. I know all these things. I've heard them millions of times, but hearing her tell them again, it brings tears to my eyes right now because I realize so deeply that all the things that I have been blaming her for, well, I haven't blamed her for the past 10, 20 years, but for the first 25, 35 years of my life, I was so angry about so many things. And yesterday was so healing for me in a way that I could fully feel the weight of her life that's been pressing on her and the weight of my grandparents' life and also my great grandparents and what how hard their life has been. And I could see the generational trauma, but I couldn't just see it. For the first time I could actually feel it and feel how beautiful it is to take responsibility for that trauma in the sense of using our ability to respond to it differently. Now, what also really struck me is that yesterday was Easter, which is, I was going to say resurrection day, right? It's the day where Jesus was resurrected on the cross, or that's where he was hanged on the cross and then died and then resurrected. So there's the whole celebration of, can we allow ourselves to elevate into who we are meant to be? Can we allow ourselves to walk our path, but also constantly remind ourselves of who we are meant to be, who we could be, um, without letting all the trauma, which of course happened to all of us, there's truth to that. But can we let who our soul is define us instead of what our trauma is and what happened define us? And I think that is a very beautiful thought during Easter. What I personally realized over the past 2 days, because my sister arrived Saturday night, is that I've done a lot of that work, but there is also a lot of identification, I would say, with the stories of my childhood that I loved. So, for instance, my grandfather, who was my mom's dad, as much as his life is being very traumatizing to my mom, he was my big hero and my person that I connected with. And he was my safe place when I was young. And I'm very grateful that what he could not be for my mom, he could be for me. But what I realized so I have his caravan. I've had that for 32 years. He died, um, let me see, he died when I was 13, almost 14. Yeah, so for 36 years ago, he died. 32 years ago, I inherited his caravan. I traveled in that thing all of my childhood together with him, feeling safe. And now that caravan is on its last legs. And my sister thought maybe I can restore it. So she came over and we looked at it, and I realized this isn't a restoration project that I would ever think of taking on if it didn't belong to my grandfather. And I realized, is is restoring this caravan what I want to do? Or is it to honor a part of my life that I don't need to have outside of me anymore? I don't need to have externally anymore. Can I let go of the weight of my mom's story, let go of the weight of my grandfather's story, let go of the weight of keeping the good things alive from other people who couldn't do that in their own life? And can I release myself of their burden? That's what I realized Saturday, Sunday, on Resurrection Day, which Easter is. Can I release myself of all the weight of the generational trauma and step into who I am meant to be? Hmm. And I was reminded of that a little bit when you just had your technical problems and your response to that. And I thought, isn't this a beautiful period of the year where we can look at, am I reacting from my past? Am I reacting would be, I need that caravan. I need it to be in the perfect state. I need to honor my grandfather. Is that honoring him? Is that truly serving? Or is it time to let go of his burden and take my ability to respond as a true granddaughter would, meaning that I make the best of my life and let go of his? What are your thoughts about this?
Mm, yeah, I might be very different from you because I don't have that much with things remembering my parents or my grandparents. I don't have this same bond, maybe, as you do. But as well, um, yeah, I think if you have internalized your memories and be happy with it as this, why should you need some kind of um, things to remember you and to honor your family? So what I saw last days was very beautiful because normally when this whole crowd of your family is together, the grandchildren of your parents, your sisters, your brother-in-laws, it's always chaotic because everyone wants to have their stories told and want to interfere and want to have their things done and have their voice heard. And these those days yesterday and day before yesterday, I found there was more room, space, uh, because your mother was in the middle of the attention. It looked like there was more ears,
Yeah.
more uh, space and curiosity.
Yeah.
So for the first time, maybe I thought, okay, there is some space here, and normally I'm very quiet. If people don't ask me things, I don't think I need to take my share in the chaos. So normally I'm not that talkative, and but I thought, okay, this really more openness. And it's not that you are not curious as a family, you are, but it's always that crowded. There's so much to be said that most of the time I'm only very exhausted in the end, and think there's not been that much real communication. And now there was so much interest, maybe because one person was in the middle,
I
and
think, yeah.
that was great. And the other thing is that normally um, I know your mother as someone who needs those stories to tell, because then she can be with other people. So she don't have to feel, she don't have to be listening that much. She can close herself a bit by keeping people out, telling her stories. And now she was it was meant that she told the stories, but it looked like she not only told them like facts, but that she had more um, affection with herself and with what were the stories about.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's beautiful what you share because I've heard them millions of times and I felt that too. And what you are talking about, I can fully relate. So my sister, just for the listeners here, my sister has a husband who's in a wheelchair and is a paraplegic, and she has a child with Down syndrome and autism. So that's a complicated family for her. It's complicated to have all everyone in the same room because there's always people who really need attention, people who you would love to give attention to, and we don't see each other that often all together, so it's always a little bit chaotic. I can relate to that. But what really struck me yesterday was the story that my mom shared, which I find hilarious, of her very first job. I think she was 18 or something, or 19. And she worked at some kind of paint factory, kleurmetaalfabriek. Yeah, some kind of metal paint factory, something like that. And I don't know what she did there actually. I'm pretty sure she shared it yesterday, but I forgot. But she was doing certain things there as administrative things in some way. And but she wasn't a coffee lady. That's the point of the story. She wasn't a coffee lady, but at that time, she was sitting in the office there doing some kind of work, office work, and the men in that company expected the girls to serve them coffee. There wasn't a coffee lady. It was just like, there's women here, so we expect you to serve the coffee. That is the way things were done back then. It's just very normal. And my mom, who didn't have any work experience, who didn't have any idea of how things should be or should not be, um, said, well, after 1 week of serving coffee to these men and seeing how these things went, she said to these other girls, I'm sorry, but we're not doing this anymore. And those girls were like, but this is what they expect of us. And my mom said, well, they might expect that if I'm not here, but I'm here. So this is not happening. And then one of the bosses of that company asked, can I have a coffee? And my mom said, sure, there's the machine, make it yourself. And she refused to get up and make it for him. And he said, well, this is part of your job. She said, this is not part of my job. And if you want coffee, you can very well make it yourself. Thank you very much. And he was being obnoxious about it. And she locked him into the archive room with a big window in the archive room. So he could see those ladies there. She locked him up. And she just happily went back to her desk and started working and ignored him completely. And the man was behind that window, mad. And my mom was like, yeah, if you are happy to make your own coffee, I'll let you out. And otherwise, not happening. She was 19 at the time or something, in an age where women did not do this. And actually, I think she worked there for 8 or 9 months or something. And then she was admitted into a school where she wanted to go. So she left because she wanted to go somewhere else. And this company was actually very sad that she left. This side of my mom was not the dominant side in my childhood. In my childhood, my mom would sit with the dishwasher on, the air cleaning filter system on in the kitchen, the washing machine on, with all these white noise machines, sitting minding her own business, not needing to speak to anyone, not tolerating emotions. I grew up with the severely traumatized part of my mom mostly dominant in the house, where it was run like an army an army place. And this fun, humorous, beautiful, strong leadership side of my mom did not come out that often when I was young, and it doesn't come out often, except for, well, occasionally. She has this window, and then she's fully there. And it what you saw yesterday was my mom taking her rightful place as tribe leader. And everybody always thinks that my dad is the tribe leader. He's not. He does everything in his power to lead, but my mom is the leader. She is the dominant person. Now, if you would meet her, you wouldn't think she was a dominant person, but she knows what she wants. And you can feel it. And it gets very unpredictable if you can feel it and she's not home. That was very unpredictable when I was young. But what you felt yesterday was the tribe leader was back.
Yeah, I'm amazed that you tell that she's the tribe leader, because now I see your parents. It's more that they're both uh, most leader of their own opinions and their own things to do and their own activities, and so I can see why there was a lot of fights, because they're both a leader and they're not very flexible to the others. And in a way they are, but there's a lot that they don't want to be overruled by the other one. And
Yeah.
so if I compare it to my own parents, there wasn't that much a fight, because it was very clear who was the leader at the home. So I don't think that's a good thing. It's really sad either, but uh, it was very clear. So there was no discussion that much, and only sometimes, and then it was for a week. It was war, but it was very rare that it happened.
Well, this is interesting that you say this because I know your family, of course, also. And I get what you say. My mom would not, if she hears this, and I don't know if she listens, but she was always saying, I need to follow your dad, and he is the provider, and I just sit here, I don't decide anything. And she would play this role of, well, I am the housewife, I take care of the house, I don't need to be in the spotlight kind of role. But That's not who she is deep down. That's not what her soul is. She is a personality to be reckoned with. And if that doesn't show up, it becomes very complicated. Now, my dad has his own way of, so my dad also had a severe war story where, as from young child onwards, he was the man of the house because my grandfather was a violin player who was very traumatized, who didn't completely understand how the world worked. So my father was the responsible person of the entire family, and that was too much for him. But hey, you know what? I need to do it. And that's the way he led our family. So, yeah, sure, I get if you would meet my family, you would think it's very traditional. My father has this personality and he just takes charge and he does everything. It's not where he thrives, though. He thrives if somebody else sets the boundaries and the rules. But my mom has the ability and didn't do it. And then my dad was left to his own accord. Same if I look at you and me, on first view, you might think that I'm the dominant person and you are just following me, or you're allowing yourself to somehow be there. But it's not true because I don't thrive if you're not fully in your capacity, and your capacity is creating a safe space where my energy can flow in. But if that safe space isn't there, I flow to the walls and the ceiling. And that's what you see with your parents as well. Your dad was a very dominant person the years I knew him. And your mom seems very, oh, I'll just flow with everything. That's not what her essence is. Her essence is somebody who knows what she wants, who can create a safe space, who, um, if she would have allowed herself to fully be present, I think it would have been easier for your dad as well. So it's now, I'm not saying it's my mom's fault or your mom's fault or what happens here. I'm just looking at, if we look at family and trauma, there's a lot to think about because we can easily think the way my mom was traumatized me. Yeah, but my mom was like that because of my dad. My dad was like that because of my mom. There's a whole system around all of this. Same with your family. And family and trauma has a lot to do with systems and with responding to each other. By lack of safe space, I will take charge. That doesn't mean that's necessarily where I thrive. That means that I didn't know any other place. So then in a new family, it will, like we have, well, it's not new anymore, but it's kind of new. It will be the first response I have. That doesn't mean it's a healthy response for me or for you or for our kids. How do you see that?
Now, what I can see is that it goes for you, but also for me is that I can see now that my development makes me free of being part of the system as soon as I put my feet over the threshold,
Yeah,
my family, home or family, because that what was what happened a long time. That I, in normal life, in everyday life, I was grown up in some certain ways in my work environment or in other with my friends. I could be, I could have maybe the illusion that I was free from all the things I had met and done and be formed, adapted to my family. Um, but as soon as I met my parents or my sisters, I was the youngest of the family again.
Yeah.
Very
Yeah.
much the little boy like to call me.
Yeah.
So and only 15 years ago that turned in a different way. So to
What
be
happened?
free as the person as I am, who I really am, um, that's yeah, that's very freeing. That I don't fall back
So,
in a role.
so share with me what happened 50, because you say 15 years ago. That's very specific. What happened?
Yeah, so from 15 years ago, so turned into more free, as you know. When we didn't know each other for that long, what kind of things could happen when I didn't attend a family event.
Yeah, I know, but the listeners don't.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
expand a little bit.
my father, he tried to get his family once a year all together, and he was very serious about it. He wanted to have his children and the grandchildren all together for a nice day out, and 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 I was always there because yeah, the event was planned months before, so the date was set. But when I met Suze and I turned into a father very sudden, uh, I had my family and we were about to move to the other side of the country, so there was a lot of things to be arranged. And so I didn't attend the event, the family event, and then I knew already that it would be a big drama. And it turned out to be a big drama because my father didn't want to see me for a few days, and I really had to turn it right. And that yeah, it was really hard for me at the time because I felt really guilty about not showing up. And, also, it felt at the time that I couldn't choose to not be there.
And it's so interesting, right? Because,
So the tension it gave me. So the tension it gave my father. It was also my tension, and I was putting it through at our home to Suze because yeah, it felt really like there was no possibility to choose different. I was really
yeah, and
stuck.
just for our listeners, I was 8 months pregnant and we were moving. So in the middle of the day before our big move to the other side of the country, 2.5 hours from where his father lives, um, I was pregnant. We were leaving everything behind. We had a baby of a year and a half, and his father blew up, made him feel guilty for all of his emotions and all of his drama. And Yakko, as he explains, felt very guilty and responsible for his dad's emotions. And I felt very abandoned.
For the rest of the family because
Yeah.
really
The rest of the family, of course, yeah, those two. Yeah, everybody was turning against you. And what I didn't understand at the time is why nobody in your family stood up and supported you in the difficult situation that we were in. So for me, it felt like, but how is it that everything is now your fault while we are going through some pretty heavy navigating ourselves? And that to me, I still somehow can't really understand. How do you look back at that?
no, but that's very. much a sign of how strong those family affairs are. The whole system is supporting all the adaptiveness that's there.
Yeah.
So the system is really a system. It's really strong and tight, and it feels like it's the law of this system that you will be there and you show up, and if you are not, you're really outcast. So sometimes we talk about, okay, how was this for the longest time in humankind, about the tribes.
Yeah.
So it feels like you betray the tribe and
Yeah.
you are dropped out.
But I'm still very curious because this was, I think, 18 years ago. And you
Hmm.
said 15 years ago it shifted. So
Yeah,
this
so
is how we met. But
yeah,
what happened in the years after?
I think that learning a lot about myself, about system, about how um, attachments work. So it's not just at a sudden 15 years ago. It's development, it's knowing myself and be
But
more
what
aware that.
changed? What did you change? Because so just for our listeners, what happened in that event that you just described is that we were moving. He didn't attend the family event um, because we really couldn't. And then his entire family blew up and started to make him feel guilty. And he did feel guilty as well. So there was this whole I can't do this, and that turned against me. Well, that's the way I experienced it, because now I was at fault for making you miss this, so I was the evil witch. I'm not sure if your family considered me that, but I'm pretty sure you said things along those lines because I was not helping you get out of the guilt trip, and we're still together. So somehow something shifted inside of you, but also inside of your mom, and also inside of your family. And when we're talking about family and trauma, I think this is very interesting because a lot of our clients think this is the way it is. I either love this person and tolerate this, or I leave and I divorce. But you grew past it, and I grew past a lot of my family trauma. Talk to me a little bit about that. What was the process you took there?
I guess most important is um, trust, confidence that I myself can support myself enough to be independent from my family. And
I
uh,
want you to go back further because this is too easy. Of course, trust
so
is the answer.
you seem to know the answer, but
No, I don't know the answer. I'm just looking at from our listeners' viewpoint, thinking, yeah, so just trust yourself and then you don't have to but that's too easy because this is what I told you 18 years ago. Why don't you just trust yourself? That is what I told you. You did not listen. It took a few years. And what I want to know is what did you do in those years in order to trust yourself?
um, there there have been a lot of things, and for me, most important is that I could really see how I was living a life from trying to get some grip on life by taking looking for what am I supposed to do in life, and
Hmm.
looking externally for what I'm
Yeah,
supposed to do. Yeah,
yeah,
that then it's really confusing because there's so many people from which you can take things, and family, of course, is one of the most likely uh, yeah, how do you say this? Parts where you can find how to
Yeah,
live, what are the norms or the values in life.
yeah,
And I still share a lot of the values, but I could really see that there's something I thought was right, or thought was true, because of I lived it my life until then, and what was really true.
yeah,
So the distinction between real truth about what's there in me
yeah,
and what I could feel inside, and literally feel into my body, instead of believing what's there. So, for example, I believed I loved my parents because I thought that's how it is. Children love their parents anyway. But as soon as I started to find out, okay, if it's like this, then I should feel it anyhow, anywhere. And if I couldn't, when I really try to find out, okay, where can I be really sure that this feeling is there in me, I couldn't find it at the time.
mm,
So by taking that seriously, so if it's so, then that might be the truth instead of what I believed it was the truth. And then things started to shift.
yeah,
And from that moment on, I could shift in any situation. Okay, this is how it's supposed to be, but I don't feel it. Can I be true for myself that it's the way? And taking seriously that what I felt myself is more valuable than all the other things,
yes,
step by step. And from that moment, I could trust myself. I could make my
yeah,
own decisions, and from that
yes.
path, I could start loving people, but then from a really me, not from a kind of yeah uh, person that I identified with.
This is very, very, very important what you're sharing. So what you're saying is my thoughts about what I feel were very different from what I was actually feeling. And I think this is very important to repeat because a lot of people that we coach here or that are in our programs or that we speak to according to after this podcast have the idea of what they're feeling, but they don't allow themselves to feel what they feel. And that is actually also often caused by trauma. I've had so many coaches and therapists tell to me or say to me, yeah, you should just feel. And I was like, shut up. I feel. Stop bothering me. I know what I feel. This is what I feel. But I wasn't feeling. I was creating thoughts around feeling and actually sensing into my body what feeling is. I was not able to do. And now that has a lot to do with family and with trauma. This is very deep developmental trauma, these things are around because 18 years ago, in the middle of that fight, you blamed me not because I was the enemy or because you didn't love me, but because this was the truth. And it isn't a sense of anyone making that up, it is a higher power in our system that has been true for, in your case, 35 years at that point. So it doesn't feel like something we can get out of. And now, of course, we need to connect to our body and look at what is actually true, but that's a hard journey.
Now, and the most difficult thing there, and that's really important, is that there's a lot of feeling when people get emotional. They feel a
Yes,
lot, but
yes,
that's not the way of feeling that is your true compass in life, because you're getting very emotional, and then you feel all kind of fears or sadness or rage or wat is tijd?
Yeah, restlessness, worries.
Worries. And so if you go from there, yeah, then you will take all kind of decisions, but they are not really coming from your real self, your true self.
So let's
So
unpack what the difference is there. Because if we are emotional, if I'm angry, I feel. If I'm in love, I feel. And those are reactive feelings. And we talk about this a lot in the podcast, reactive versus responsive. And reactive are these feelings that in the moment are being pulled out through some external event, like somebody cutting you off in traffic, or somebody treating you like shit, or somebody that you're madly in love with. But these are reactive feelings. And now we're talking about that you shifted from reactive feelings into responsive feelings, which are feelings that are a response to an event, but not caused by the event. They're what is true in your soul and in your system. It's not so easy, though, to always know the difference, to be in touch with that. How did you do that? And what, so first of all, why did you not give up on that journey and how did you walk it?
the truth is that as soon as I found out that I was censoring my real feelings by following my emotions or kind of values that weren't mine, and also kind of rules that weren't mine, I could I took my moments every time there was a decision to make. Okay, what's really happening here? What's good for me as the real self, or am I only reacting on some circumstance from in the manner that I was used to before? So um, it, and gradually it became more easy. It took a while. That's why I said it's from 18,
Yes.
15 years ago, and not.
Yeah. And it probably took the entire 15 years.
And I'm not especially very good in feeling nowadays. I feel a lot more than I did, but but I really take seriously that the feeling is inside my body. It's really it's a sensations. It's not emotion is most of the time a feeling, but there are also all kind of thoughts and beliefs attached to those feelings.
Yes.
So only when they're not attached to beliefs or feelings or thoughts, then it could be real information about what's there in me and what kind of reactions I have.
Yeah, and this is very, very where it gets very interesting because very often we don't say, when you say this, my left leg starts shaking. What we say is, when you say this, you're making me angry. Well, that's a filter because that right there is a filter because we don't know whether we're angry or not. We're already interpreting the fact that our left leg is shaking could also be release. And we're labeling it already as anger. And maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but it isn't a clean filter that we're looking through. So if we allow ourselves to pause and to look at what is really going on, then we get different kinds of information and very subtle types of information, but we need to consciously allow ourselves to open up to that. And I think you are very willing to do that. I think I'm very willing to do that. And I think human nature in itself is willing to do that. And I think family and trauma can get us in a place where we won't be able to do that. And then we think, I need my bank account in order. I need everything in order. I need security because if I have that, then I can live. And this is another thing that touched me so deeply yesterday. And I'm sure your family has stories about this too. And my grandmother, she grew up in Hungary. That's where she was born and raised. My grandfather and my grandmother met at the end of the war when the Russians came and raped my grandmother and all kinds of horror stories. Awful, awful, awful things. They had to escape there. So they escaped together. Took them months to get to England. And most people who did that never arrived in England. So they were very, very, very lucky, um, and probably protected by some kind of God who got them to England. But my grandfather lost everything. He was in his 60s at the end of the war, and the Hungarian government took all his possessions. He had absolutely no money, no home, no company. They took everything away from him, and he could stay in Hungary. And thank goodness he didn't, because then the Iron Curtain came, of course. So he left Hungary to the UK with nothing. He had to start over again. He had nothing. And and I can tell you story after story after story after story of my family losing everything at an age where most people would feel like, no, 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 I need my pension. I need my retirement fund because otherwise I don't know what I'll do. But all these things can be erased tomorrow. If we allow ourselves to do the inner work that Jakko and I are describing, that is where we can allow ourselves to respond from a different place than this family trauma. What is your take on this, Jakko?
um, go on a bit because I don't know where you're
Okay. Well, so where I'm going is um, that a lot of people will say, yeah, I need to get rid of my family trauma. I need to get rid of all these patterns. I need to get rid of all these things. And you know what? I'll just build money. I'll build a business. I'll build a new safe family. And then I can just choose because I created the circumstances. And in those circumstances, I can choose whether to interact with this or not. Now, the interesting thing is, what I really learned over the past years, but yesterday really somehow landed in me differently, is that it doesn't matter because we can't work for tomorrow. We just can't. Yeah, we can do all kinds of reasonably well thought out things, but the world isn't a reasonably thought out place. And wars can happen, government policies can happen. There is no way of protecting yourself from life by choosing to build new walls instead of the old family walls. That's where I was going.
hmm Yeah. So if I look at my own family, where I come from, it's really a lot about safety. And
Yeah,
of course, also my parents were very young when there was the Second World War. Uh, and I think because they had that in their child years, they were very much about safety. They had enough, maybe enough adventure for their lives.
yeah,
Maybe they believed that, and so that's where I come from be very protective to our circumstances and always try to be safe and be prepared and be not too adventurous. And um, I've lost a lot of this, but there's still a lot in me at the same time. So it takes a lifetime to get rid of all those patterns and coping mechanisms that are given through.
yeah. And what I'm also realizing now that I'm hearing you speak is, yeah, it takes a lifetime, maybe. On the other hand, maybe, and this is a question that we'll dive into next week again, because maybe our soul came with certain corrections that it wanted to make in this life, and all these family patterns are showing you in a very harsh way where your soul wanted to look in the first place. Now, I'm not so sure that there are 20 souls up there somewhere deciding who's going to play what role in your life. Maybe, maybe not. I just don't know. And nobody can ever prove any of this. So maybe that's true. Maybe it's all coincidence. It doesn't matter why these people are on your path. What does matter is that what I have learned to be deeply true in specifically family and generational trauma is that we can use all of what happened as doors to open to our true self. So, all the family trauma that I talked about in the beginning, the way my mom treated us, the role mix up between my mom and my mom being the beautiful leader that she is, but not stepping into that role, and the whole chaos that that created, we can say it caused a lot of trauma in me. And that is very accurate. But all of that trauma I have found to be doorways that led me into revealing the divine part of me. So my path towards revealing God in my life, because I believe God is a higher energy power, not a man in the sky, not a man in church. Although some churches might be beautiful, but it's none of that. It's a higher power that is being revealed through us if we allow ourselves to follow the thread of that divine path. And actually, all of these dramas and traumas and patterns, if we dive underneath them, that is where we find that. So if I dive underneath who my mom really was, if I dive underneath her childhood and I find parts of what I was meant to be, and I find parts of me restore, I reveal that divine part in me. So even though this family shit, I would call it, is solid gold if we allow ourselves to use it. I've seen you do that too. Your whole story that you just shared about choosing to not love your parents because you didn't feel it led to you loving them immensely deep.
Yeah.
And it led to you relating to love in a profoundly different way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, guys, this is a really weird place to end a podcast. But we've been talking about it for an hour right now, and I actually think that there is a lot more around how do wounds of the past reveal the gold of tomorrow. I think that is what we're going to talk about next time. Is there anything you want to share for now, Jakko?
No, so you came up with how trauma is also a possibility for shifting certain things, and that's the weird thing because we always tend to avoid those difficulties in our lives, and in the end they show up as the best things that happened. So it's such a contra.
Counterintuitive. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's counterintuitive. So um, yeah, so I would say a lot of worries we have as humans are really keeping us from our best possibilities, and that's a strange into dictionary.
Yeah. Oh my guys, this is such a beautiful, beautiful, deep, and it's this we can talk about this for weeks, because there's in the sharing of these stories, there is a lot of healing that we do. Next week on Monday, we will talk deeper about how these wounds of the past can turn into the gold of tomorrow and for our future. I hope you will tune in again. If you have any questions, let us know, tag us, rate us if you're listening to this on Spotify or on Apple iTunes. Um, Rate this podcast, share it with your friends. If you have any requests, let us know. And we can't wait to see you next week. Bye for now.
Bye.